This car is the most honest car you ever see.
It's been a dream ever since I've had it.
The first time I heard that engine screaming, I thought, I gotta have one of those.
For me, the cars have personality.
What's great about a BMW Classic is the community that surrounds it.
When you listen to that, that's why we're here.
Welcome to Classic Heart, the BMW Group Classic podcast. This is JP, and our guest today is a real professor, not just a designer. And I need to strike the just. No, he is a real professor and a dear friend of mine. And I'm so happy, Paolo Tumminelli, that you're joining us. Sorry, I need to correct that. Professor Paolo Tumminelli. Paolo, welcome to Classic Heart.
JP, very happy to be here with you. And please don't call me professor. That makes me look and feel old.
This is like a non-video podcast in the majority of our recordings. So I can tell you that if aging is like Paolo, I have no fear about getting old, because you are the youngest 40-something I know in my life.
I don't even know your age, Philip. So That's perfect. I know the age of cars.
So for those who might not know you, you are an Italian living in Germany. More precisely in the beautiful city of Cologne in Western Germany, or the western part of Germany. How did you end up as an Italian who studied at the Politecnico in Milan? How did you end up in Cologne? I ask as a German.
Well, my Milanese friends always say, you are so square, you're more square than a German. It's obvious that you have to go to Cologne or to Germany. It was all by chance. I hardly ever planned anything in my life. And so at a certain point, I found myself working for a German company in Germany. Then they imported me to Germany, and I loved it. And there I stayed. And I still love it.
So what makes Germany a cool country for a designer?
Do I say it as a designer or as an Italian? Because it's two different things.
Maybe both.
You know, Italian people are always a little bit, there's a victimism and an inferiority complex on the other side. And whatever comes from abroad is always better. So for the cars, of course, the German cars are better. But also when we were younger, we used to read Automotor und Sport. It was a terrible exercise to read a German magazine, but we thought this was the Bible in cars. And this idea that Germans do it better, although perhaps not everything, but it is kind of true. I have the feeling that when it comes to theory, when it comes to substance, when it comes to methods, when it comes to research, there's an attitude that is thoroughly German, Teutonic, and this I appreciate a lot. We Italian, and sorry if I go into commonplaces, maybe more spontaneous, more impulsive, but sometimes much less I would say professional. I can make you a very stupid anecdote if you wish.
Sure,
but coming to Germany and being ahead in product development for a company that used to do household goods, porcelain, china, glassware, and everything. We made a fantastic joint venture with an Italian company doing just about the same, and they were producing these glasses designed by Sozzas. And we wanted to sell them through our retail. And we asked, are these glasses dishwasher proof? And they said, of course they are. And then everybody was happy. And then we started selling it. The company started selling it. And see there, disaster. Everybody kept complaining. You put the glass in the dishwasher and they destroy themselves. So we complained back to the Italian. They said, whoa, we tested them. And for us, it was okay. And then the German engineer of the company said, how did you test them? Well, he said, my mother put them in the dishwasher and nothing happened. And then that's exactly the point. The dishwasher safe for Germans means testing really. And for the Italians, it means if they don't break in the dishwasher, they are dishwasher safe.
So lucky punch. So
lucky punch.
You would say that the Italian design success is also made a lucky punch sometimes, or made by a lucky punch sometimes?
Absolutely, and we are full of histories of that. Beta versions of most cars have been given to the public for them to test them and perfect them further. But, it's always difficult. Now, I already put myself in a corner I don't want to be. In my first phase in Germany, when I was writing a lot, and especially something I loved, which was the Tumminelli's design critique in Handelsblatt. Whenever I treated something Italian and said, this is not so good, I got the Italian calling me and saying, why did you say it's not so good? You are Verräter in German. You should speak well of Italian things. Then whenever I spoke badly of some German things, the German told me, how dare you as an Italian speak badly about German things? You do your policy. I say, well, I cannot make anyone happy.
I recommend everyone who listening in to Google Tumminelli and Handelsblatt, and you will find one of the most hilarious section of the Handelsblatt, which is a economic-orientated newspaper in Germany. But it's hilarious. You find things like wonderful titles that says "Melange of beans, bees, and bananas" when it comes, for example, to taillights. So I would recommend to read them. But my question to the critic today is, why is Italian car design so outstanding? What is the secret?
Well, the secret is very simple. It's poverty. We were poor. We've been a poor country, specifically after the war, which we lost. And while everybody was investing billions in creating up-to-date industries, also the automotive industry, Italy didn't have the means. And so they put together two other things that you need that you have beside poverty. It's imagination and skills, crafts. In the areas specifically of Turin, of Milan, and also of Modena, people started doing what they could do, which was working with metal. Working with materials, with fabrics, with just about anything you need to put together, for instance, a car. And they were good at doing that. They were imaginative at doing that. And they were also cheap at doing that because, again, as I said, we were poor. Yes. So what happened is that a system was created, which is very much like the system that was created in furniture and other areas of design, whereby for many companies, the Americans in the first place, was rather convenient to come to Turin and have new cars, not only styled, but also prototyped and sometimes built in Turin. And we're not talking about mass-produced cars. We're talking about high-end limited editions. You may remember the Imperial by Chrysler. It was designed in America, but it was produced in Italy because nobody in America could build such splendid cars in such a limited numbers. So the Italians developed the system. And we are talking about the 50s, the 60s, and down to the 70s, whereby it was the kind of haute couture of car design. You could have your bespoke cars styled and manufactured in Torino, and it would cost you a fraction of whatever it would be the price in Germany or in America or in France. France, Germany, America, they all had their coach builder before the war, the Figoni and Falaschi, the South Chic, the Erdmann and Rossi, and of course the Fischer and others in America, but Fleetwood. But after the war, these didn't survive. They only survived in Italy, and they became a unique source of creativity for the whole automotive industry worldwide.
But besides craftsmanship, why do Italians have such an extremely good sense of taste and style? You get the feeling they have it in their blood, to my opinion. I mean, no one anywhere else is so well dressed than Italians. And I think the car design is also pretty good. So where does it come from that Italians have this sense of style? What do you think?
Well, look around. I mean, Italy is the cradle of just about anything artistic. Yes, we stole something from the Greek a couple of millennia ago, but everybody came to Italy too. Italy was probably the first melting pot for cultures, for styles, for lifestyles too. And in a way, I believe that no other place has been able to develop such a rich and varied sense for fine arts, crafts, and you would say design towards the 20th century, like Italy. And yes, you may know that Milanese don't identify with Sicilians, and the Neapolitans don't identify with Romans, and you have the Venetians, the Bolognese, and all these people create a really, you would say, multi-talented, multi-stylistic society. Yeah. And, Italy was born in 1860. It's quite young. So talents from very different regions came together, and this created probably a unique conglomerate of creativity and of style. Certainly for Fiat, to design a car that pleased the eye of the Italian middle class was a more difficult task than, I'd say, the German company having to satisfy the style of the average German family. And if you put the Fiat 124, which was an extremely successful car of the 60s, and a very simple object, 3-box, plain car. But if you look at this car in detail, it's extremely refined. And other people didn't care. Take even Great Britain, you take a Morris Marina, and it's not quite as beautiful as the Fiat used to be.
For me, it makes total sense what you said about the melting pot of a high culture, coming also from a high culture in the Roman Empire at that time, ended up in a very overacting point in history where then came the downfall and then recreated again. But I think it makes total sense that there comes some beauty out of it if you're surrounded by beauty. It could be nature, it could be architecture. It helps you to reflect this on yourself and on your taste. And maybe that's the reason why. Everyone goes on holidays to Italy, right? Lake Como. You are at the moment at Lake Garda. Then we have the Tuscany region, Florence, everything just beautiful and full of history. And fair to say, of course, Italian built great cars, Ferrari, Lancia, Alfa, Fiat, everything. But what I really like is also that one of the export goods of Italians is design. Let's look at the BMWs designed by Italians. So we have the E34 5 Series, Ercole Spada, the famous guy, Mr. Double Bubble. Hilarious person. When you met him, he speaks fluent German, no English, but Italian as well, of course, obviously. So there's an export in Italian design, which many people might not be knowing. There are Zagatos, the BMW Zagatos later on, like the design studies showed in Villa d'Este. We have the Zagato Roadster, I think it came off in Pebble Beach. Giugiaro with Ital design, with the Nazca C2. It's a car I don't necessarily like. It's not my type of design, but it's a personal thing. But it is an export good, and I really like it that is there as export good because it helps also shaping other brands outside of Italy to help to create interesting plus functionality is also a plus cars, in my opinion.
You really touch an important point, and I'm glad you addressed the issue of exporting design. Design as a discipline is probably the first transnational and transcultural discipline, because really design was very much about traveling abroad and importing and exporting creativity. The relationship between Italy and Germany is particularly dense and intense, if you want. You mentioned Giugiaro, who also, not to correct you, but I'm a professor, so I have to get back to you. He also did the M1, which is still perhaps one of the most fascinating BMW.
I just wanted to give you the chance to say M1.
So you wanted to see if I knew.
Of course. It was just a test.
And we have Michelotti. Giovanni Michelotti did a lot of early BMWs. Now you can discuss about what Mr. Hofmeister did and what Michelotti really did, but we are sure that the 700 Coupe is by Michelotti. We are sure that there's a lot of Michelotti in the new class, so the 1500, 1800. That's quite astonishing, I believe.
Yes.
You mentioned Ercole Spada, which is correct, but also beyond and behind BMW, there are more Italians that in fact created perhaps the best of German automobiles. Let's forget Bruno Sacco at Mercedes.
No. 100%.
And don't let's forget in newer days, Walter de Silva at Audi specifically, and then later Volkswagen
Yes.
Group. So you see, it's quite interesting. Conversely, it is very true that Germans also came to Italy, perhaps not in form of too much in form of people, but in form of education. Germany has a very strong design background, not only theory, but also practice. And there was a thing called School for Design in Ulm, Hochschule für Gestaltung, that was frequented by many Italians. There was one guy, Pio Manzu,
Who's that?
son of artist, who studied there and came back to Italy to do small Fiats, but very interesting vehicles. He did the Fiat 127, and he brought German design to Fiat, which was quite interesting.
This is what the automotive world has also changed a lot. I think this was actually one of the first globalized industry, in a sense, like the fashion industry, where you have many talents from all over the world working for their native brands. And the automotive world is one of these. So let's talk a bit more about you to give a bit background to those who tuned in to this episode. You were born in Italy. Whereabouts?
I was born in Milano.
In Milan, of course, proud Milanese. Sorry for this, perdone.
No, but it's a very complicated story, in fact. But I cannot make it too long. But I actually should have been born at Lago di Garda. But for identity reason, my parents preferred to have me labeled as nato a Milano than nato a Salò, and I wouldn't elaborate on that. But I was raised at Lago di Garda, which is this kind of idyllic, it's a little Disneyland. Especially for a kid. Until 16, 18, you can survive. Then you want to leave, and I went back to Milano.
So, did you always want to become an architect, or was there always the dream to become a designer, and more precise, in automotive?
I had a passion for cars. The passion for cars, I believe, was innate. But when I was around 4, I think I made my first drawing, and I would remember my brother is a 2 years older brother. Of course, he made a drawing of an animal, perhaps a lion, and I made a drawing of a car. Which was shocking my rather intellectual family, how dares he design a car. And I kept drawing cars for ages. I was, standing or sitting in front of the car and look at it, or sit inside and pretend to drive it. This was really a very intense passion I had. But the idea that you could become a car designer only grew up during my years at Politecnico. And I may have some sort of ambition, but thanks to doing this, today you would call it internship at Centro Stile Alfa Romeo, I was lucky to immediately realize that it was never going to make me happy. Designing a car is a very complex task. There is an interior designer and an exterior designer, but you never do, or hardly ever do, the whole car on your own. So I realized that this job was not going to make me happy. And I lived again in Italy in a period of, I would say, quite desperate situation for the car industry, the early 90s. Fiat had no money, Alfa Romeo had no money, Lancia had no money. In Italy, nobody had money to transform the automobile into something new. And so it didn't seem to be the wisest thing to do to go in car design back then. So I abandoned this idea. And now I would say I'm very happy I did.
And today you are a professor, a true professor, as we mentioned in the beginning, of design concepts at the Köln International School of Design. Still, it catches me that it's not called Cologne, but anyway, that's me. You do this for more than 20 years now. Besides that, you have written several books. For example, about car design in Europe, in America, and Asia. The Alpina book you worked on, a book called Luxury Toys that is related to classic cars. So in the end, car design is still your topic number one, isn't it?
My field of research is the consumption culture. So whatever is made to be consumed and how our life from the second half of the 20th century has become a consumer's life. Basically just anything we do is based on the principle of consumption, and no other object is more consumeristic than the automobile, but in a positive sense, I wish to say, because no other object gives you so much freedom of self-expression as the automobile. So this is a combination of abusing the automobile to study specifically design, and on the other side, of course, focusing a passion that has always been with me, and it is linked with competence to study the automobile, so to research the history, to monitor the present, and to try and if not design, at least conceptualize possible ways for a future of the automobile, which is very dear to me.
And you're also being active a bit in the way to make the car part of the UNESCO World Heritage. Is that correct?
This is a very ambitious plan, which is not a new plan, but it is a necessary plan. I believe it's important to support the private individual mobility through any kind of vehicle, but specifically the automobile. And it's important to do it not as a company making cars, not as an organization for people driving, racing, or maintaining cars, but just as citizens, as I would say very normal people, in fact. And with that, I have a partner in crime, my friend, and actually also your friend, Gabi von Hoppenheim.
Also guest in our podcast, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Necessarily so.
2 times already.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, she's cuter than me, so she deserves that.
Don't reduce her to that one. You're also very cute.
She's so enthusiastic, not only about what she does, but about what has to be done.
Yes.
We have started 2 years ago launching an initiative called Automobile Dinner, which is a gathering of car guys who are not car guys, but people who think, philosophers, artists, just any kind of personality that has a sensibility for cars. And bringing these people together, we understand that there is an opportunity to push UNESCO to understand the value of the car in cultural terms and to declare the car World Heritage. If we succeed, I think this will be a very important step in, not so much lobbying against anything, but just to make sure that we don't forget what the automobile has done for our society and what it is still doing for millions of people every day.
Let me be a bit challenge this a little bit, because if we look at back in history, there were locomotives, this big, massive metal, fire-spitting machinery, which is like people wrote books about it. They made movies out about it, and we saw them. And nowadays, we only see them in museums and amusement parks. And the electric locks and the locks we see, or the locomotives we see, they have not this impact on people. Do you see the risk that's going to happen to the combustion-powered car as well?
I hope not. The combustion-powered car must have a meaning in areas where, very banal, there is no infrastructure that can bring you electricity or hydrogen to feed fuel cells.
Yeah.
We must know that, yes, many more people are going to live in metropolitan areas in the future, and we know that most of the economy takes place in metropolitan areas, but our planet is vast, and there are so many people still, hundreds of millions of people living in areas where a combustion engine is probably the only means of survival, very much in the sense that motivated Henry Ford to produce an automobile back in 1900. And we just can't these people off because we decide that the combustion engine is bad.
Speaking of heritage, I think it would be interesting to talk about the beginnings. You just mentioned Henry Ford. He produced the 1908 Model T, which is still looked like a carriage more than a car as we see it today. But it was the first car that was brought to market and available to a very broad number of people. So because it was so cheap, people could afford it. Would you say that the Model T is actually the spark of the idea of individual transport? Did it all start with the Model T?
the outburst of the automobile really happened actually before Henry Ford launched the Model T. Is 1 year before is when they made this crazy race from Beijing to Paris. And, the Figaro started a campaign saying, who wants to race a car from Beijing to Paris? Beijing to Paris in 1907 meant 14,000 kilometers, of which 12,000 without a road.
Yes.
And then they found a bunch of people that did it. Now I could say, well, Italians won. But
obviously.
Obviously. And I would not go into details there. But the Italians won, basically making the automobile a viable solution for even long-range mobility across unknown lands. This made the automobile suddenly not a toy anymore, because the first automobiles were kind of, people went, remember the Red Flag Act in Great Britain, whereby there had to be someone walking in front of the car and waving a red flag. And this was the maximum speed for a car, walking speed. Totally insane ways to forbid the spreading of automobility. But in fact, when people realized that the car enabled more freedom and enabled more intercultural exchange, the car finally was accepted. And I believe it's not a coincidence if Henry Ford 1 year later started producing his famous Model T.
So before the Model T, driving was only for adventurers and a few wealthy people. And through Model T, the individual automotive transport started becoming a social phenomenon.
And here we have my friend Tom Standage, who wrote a fantastic brief history of motion, which he wrote for other reasons, but I misused his words by distilling the fact that the car has been there for 5,000 years. 5,000 years. It was already there 3,000 years before Christ, and it was driven by an ox. Then later it took roughly 1,000 years for the horse to be invented. And the horse made the car go 6 times faster, from 6 kilometers per hour to 30 kilometers per hour. Now, yes, there were chariots, but they called them cars. And these chariots had a track of roughly 1.40 meters. And the roads were made to host chariots. And 1.40 meters is more or less the same track of every passenger cars. I mean, perhaps not the monsters of today, but if you go back to your Beetle or Golf, it's more or less 1.40 meters, 1.45 meters. So it is not so much what engine you've got inside.
I mean, I have to say that the comparison to the ox as one of the first engines, or let's say empowerment for a car, I don't get that, to be honest. But that's open for discussion, and so I think that it doesn't have much to do with our individual transport from A to B. But that's again open.
Even ancient Rome was driven for cars. There were laws that regulated the parking spots for chariots in Rome, just as they do today for cars.
Point taken. And it's definitely worth looking into the history of the automobile, if you say so. But coming to a point to more recent cars, there's one car that I would like to speak with you about, because you said in an interview that this car is a pioneer in electric mobility and a brave step of BMW. And the car you mentioned is the BMW i3, which everyone who tunes in knows that I love this car. I have a deep affection. I like the practicability of that car. I really like the design of it, the concept of the seats, everything. I'm just a big fan. For me, this is the perfect city car. So as a design professor, what makes the i3 so special, or let's say so pioneering in its field?
Well, to justify every judgment, I may admit to having perhaps an odd taste when it comes to cars. I don't look at the things that most people look at, because some things don't interest me, like the shape of the exhaust pipes. For instance, I still don't consider them to be a part of the car design or the value of car design. What the i3 had was in its perhaps even its naivety, if you want to say it today, but it was driven by the belief that the automobile had to change as it transformed from combustion engine to electric engine. That as the automobile changed, you had the chariot with the horse, and you just didn't take away the horse and you kept driving the chariot. Things changed. There was a different architecture. There was a different setup. And also the setup would suit the difference in performance that the transformation of a drivetrain would bring with itself. So when BMW did these two cars, which were the i3 and then, to be correct, also the i8, they envisioned a completely different way to put together a car. So something that has remained of the i3 is the way the exterior is conceived in terms of a kind of a skin, a plastic skin, something very lightweight, something very, you would say, not monolithic. That is what disturbed most people. This car had a kind of black mask treatment that made it look, I don't know, unstable perhaps, or just odd to look at. And I believe this is what disturbed most people. But the box, as it was, especially put on very thin, tall wheels, something that came from a project called Mindset, one of the pioneering experiment in car design in Europe, in electric car design in Europe. We're talking about 2007, 2008. But this idea of an ultra lightweight vehicle, compact, put on thin wheels, offering a completely different perception of interior space, because basically the cockpit disappeared as the engine bay disappeared. I don't think I always was too happy about this car having the kidneys, the BMW kidneys, because I thought there is no engine behind it, so you don't need them. But there's an issue of corporate identity, which perhaps was a different story. But the car as a whole was one true and honest attempt to make the electric car different from the combustion car, and for the better, to enhance the advantages of electric engines, which are ultra efficient. But an electric car today has batteries that has the same weight as a full combustion car of the past. And I don't see the sense of it. So the i3 was biased towards lightweight, and it had a shell made of carbon fibers. It had very lightweight materials. It had thin wheels. It was absolutely efficient as a concept, and it could have been a way to start discussing a new architecture for the automobile of the future that was based on an electric engine that disappeared, and so also the engine bay would disappear, and the radiator grille would disappear, and many things you don't need in an electric car disappeared, and what remains is space, or just perhaps less car, to have a smaller car, a more compact car that is more agile and more convenient to use, especially in metropolitan areas. So a project that fascinated me when it came out. I loved the weird doors, but
yes, me too.
I don't have children, so I don't need to have this quick in and out all the times. But I think it was an incredible space feeling, and also an incredible dynamic feeling when you drove this car, which perhaps remind the people had the engine in the back and everything in the back. So coupled to these wheels, it made you feel you were driving something special. It was not just one more of those cars you have out there and you can rent for no money.
Yeah, for me, that's also a point. And, also from the interior. So the greenhouse allows you to sit, even if you have a certain height, you can sit very comfortably in the back, which I really like, even in that compact form. So I can sit in the back quite comfortably. Of course, the seat needs to go a bit up front. But if I look at modern limousines today, I really hardly can sit in the back. But to the point with the batteries, I think we just have to allow it a bit more time. If I look at the latest batteries made by Northvolt, the Swedish company, and others, I think there will be also development in making them lighter. As engines got also lighter due to modern things, I think we just need to give it more time. But you mentioned a very interesting point I haven't looked at. You said that it was a very interesting concept of an electric car, so totally different, the approach. And looking now at the cars that are electrified, do you think we have lost something with the i3? That this thinking was not continued in a sense?
We certainly have lost every form of imagination or the possibility to imagine a different car. Because if you look at your typical electric car, the most sold today, they are either compact crossover SUVs or just plain hatchbacks. There is no idea of a necessity to rethink. And I understand the car industry is a huge industry, takes huge investments, means huge risks, and nobody wants to take these risks. But when I see, and I think one example is Peugeot, you know, you can have the same car, it's 208, you can have it electric or combustion, and it's exactly the same car.
Yeah, it became more just an option, not like a real innovation.
When I was involved in this electric car project in 2007, and one pioneering project in Europe, there was a big problem making people understand just what an electric car is. And having had the chance to drive one very early, me being a motorboat rider, I said, this is not motorboat, this is sailing boat. So I understood that there was a completely different way for propulsion, because with an electric car, you give not gas, you give electricity, and then the car goes, and then there is no friction. You know, it's a very smooth ride. And there is something that I believe in, it's called segeln, so really sailing, even in combustion cars today, when they detach the transmission and the car goes by itself.
Yes.
But with electric cars, it's not only that, you can also recuperate the energy, so you don't brake. The engine brakes, transforming negative energy in positive energy for the battery. And this is genius. This gives you a completely new idea of what driving is. So the fact that, I mean, if you exaggerate a bit, you would say you can climb a mountain and consume all your energy, but then going down and never using the brake, you can get your energy back. It's not quite possible, but it is actually what happens in an electric car. This gives you a beautiful relationship to the car itself. And this quality must be reflected in a completely different approach to what driving a car is.
So let's take this and have a look into the future. What do you think? How will cars look like, let's say, in 2050, which is not that far away from now?
No, absolutely not. But you must keep in mind that the automobile develops very slowly. And we are seeing this happening nowadays. I don't think it is possible to transform the car into the smartphone of tomorrow, meaning to having a kind of standard shape with very minor differences between the iPhones, the Samsungs, and the Huaweis of this world. And I cannot imagine that there's going to be one look. Some cars will look like Buckingham Palace, some cars will still look like the iPod, and some cars will perhaps look like Disneyland, and it's going to be good, so depending on the brand. But what I hope to see happening is a transformation of the concept of automobile towards a more individual mean of transportation. We should not forget that the automobile has the shape it has because when the automobile was invented, the average family had 6 people.
Yeah.
So we had 6 seaters, you know, but just every banal car had a bench in the front and a bench in the back, and you can sit free. Then numbers went down and we agreed that 5-seater was enough. Then nowadays, if you look, even a large premium car has basically become a 4-seater. And one day we will acknowledge that with a different societal pattern, with more single household, with more people living alone, with less of the corporate families that we used to have, there is going to be the need for cars that basically are your individual form of transportation. And when 2 people go to some places, perhaps they will use two cars, which is actually what happens today already. But of course, I wouldn't sit alone in a 6 meters car that weighs 3 tons. And let's forget how beautiful it is to drive small, lightweight, ultra-efficient vehicles. In fact, when we look at racing cars, I mean, even the Formula One, they are reduced to being a very, very small, at least in terms of usage of space.
Sure.
Now, they're white objects, and we shouldn't continue thinking that if you are someone, you need to have a big car, because that is gone nowadays. I mean, the cheapest thing you can buy is a huge German luxury limousine with an age on it. You know, there's this idea that the large car must be the more expensive and the better car. I think it's totally bygone. We shouldn't be doing that. So to go back to your question, I hope to see variety in design, but a more human-centered in terms of individually centered shape. And be it a sports car or your daily commuter, perhaps we will accept that we can have more compact two-seaters that give us a completely different freedom of space inside, because probably they will not be much smaller than the cars we have today, but they will enable many more things in terms of usage of living patterns than we do it today. I watch trends a lot. Now there's a big trend. We know all about the camper wagon, of course, but many people put tents on the roofs and start thinking that it's cool to sleep on your car. And perhaps one day you will understand that it's also cool to sleep in your car. I mean, it's electric, it's heated, it has a fantastic interior design. It has the best entertainment system you want to have. It has massage seating, and so perhaps your car, which is clean, also becomes your guest room or guest house when people come to see you.
Yes, that's actually a good idea.
All these things are thinkable, but with that we have to accept that automobile must change.
Yes, so we are looking into a hopefully interesting future of the automotive world. Change will come. It will come. That's the one thing that's for sure. And with this, we come to a close of this very intellectual, smart, interesting conversation. Paolo, thank you very much for joining this session tonight. I really enjoyed it.
Philip, thank you for hosting me, and talking to you, it's always inspiring, and I'm sure we'll keep doing it here or anywhere else.
There will be a lot of platforms where we can do so. And also thank everyone who joined in. And we'd like to thank also the team behind our little podcast, which is Alexander and Marcus from Scenario Studio in Munich, Federica von Königswald, who takes care that what we say and what we do here sounds also interesting after some work done. So she is our head of content, our editor queen here. And also Robin, who puts everything together in the background. Thank you very much. And if you like what you hear, please leave us some stars on the rating. Put the subscribe button that you never miss an episode. And also share with us who you want to hear next after Professor Paolo Tumminelli joining us here. Paolo, grazie a lei.
Philip, grazie a te.
It was very, very cool. Thank you very much. And that's for it now. And we hear each other in 2 weeks. Thank you and bye-bye.